Hello, welcome to my music theory class for advanced music theory topics that are presented in such a way that will be helpful to beginners. A lot of beginners feel like music theory, it's this element that hinders them. There's a couple of reasons why people feel that, and that's because a lot of the music theory that is taught is incredibly simple when a lot of the music that we listen to is incredibly complex. While there is a lot of simple music that does exist out there, a lot of the music that we tend to have an interest towards, especially if it's of really good players, they tend to have a lot of skills that are just simply not taught. You have a lot of teaching into the basic chordal stuff that structures modern music. A lot of times people get a classical approach to music theory, and that is totally detrimental, especially if they're just working on contemporary music. You basically have no benefit to using classical music theory because the music you make is so far removed from the time period that music was made, which had a preference towards a lot of certain techniques. When it comes to music and current state things, one of the common techniques that is done, at least to demonstrate to people that they have a good understanding of music, is improv. A lot of really great musicians out there showcase their improv skills, like Jacob Collier, Corey Henry. I could list off countless examples. Esperanza Spalding has fantastic abilities to improv. We're going to break down improv. We're going to kind of understand what goes on with improv and why so many musicians are so great at it and why there are some musicians that just take it to a whole new level. When it comes to improv, having a strong understanding of form is key. When I mean understanding of form, there's a couple of contexts in which this applies. So writing music is very helpful to you understanding form because there are just so many options you can take. There are so many things you can learn with like melodic devices, what you can do to form in a verse. You can do a whole bunch of different stuff and stuff that's a little bit more distinct to what you do in a chorus. Stuff like that. Understanding form in that context is important. But also when it comes to like jazz, which tends to be where improv has taken off and become really refined in a sense. A lot of the really good improvisers also play jazz. That tends to be the case. Not saying that there aren't a ton of people that don't improvise, because let's say metal, there's a lot of solos, rock solos. Improv is important in a variety of different genres. Form, understanding at least genre-wise, whatever genre you use, understanding that for the many iterations it has helps you with being able to nail good improv. When it comes to jazz and understanding form, being able to know when, there's a main focus on rehash of melodies where you're focusing on maybe one or two melodies in particular, that's your strong suit, and then you have like a solo section. Understanding that is important to one of my later steps, which has to do with setting up and breaking expectations. Because once you have an understanding of form, then you're able to do stuff like set up an expectation and then totally diverge from it, and that throws your audience a little bit for a loop. And so, as you can see, throwing your audience for a loop is kind of the way that a lot of really good improvisers work. They're able to throw their audience for a loop in a number of ways by using some less used techniques where someone might burst out into like 64th notes where it's really, really fast, but they've gotten so good at being able to improv melodies that 64th notes is no big deal for them. The next basis to understanding improv is melody and as well extensions. When it comes to melody, being able to figure out some really good ideas is important, which tends to be a struggle of a lot of beginner musicians, because having that melody bank, I like to call it a bank that you can pull from, something that you can borrow from. You have this bank of knowledge of melodies and extensions. You can utilize them in a variety of different ways, but when you're starting out, you don't know that many absolutely amazing melodies that you're in love with every step of the way. And so when it comes to jazz, you have to have some really, really strong melodies, or you have to have such a strong ability with melodies that you're never bugged by the melodies that you play. If as a beginner, you're not very fond of your melodies, that becomes a big struggle. Not only that, as a beginner musician, understanding extensions, it's very difficult to get utilizing extensions, because to you, since whenever you hear these extensions being played by yourself, since you don't have good context in which you like said extensions, or you have a more difficult time getting context in which you like said extensions, you struggle with the idea of incorporating a lot of melodies into your improv. Being able to get really good at expressing the melodies that you like and being able to find a good melodic voice, figuring out what extensions you prefer, all the odd ones, and figuring out how to incorporate them into your music, that's so important, and that takes forever. That is a skill that you will be struggling with for a very long time. When you struggle with that skill, you struggle to get good at improv. And so my goal with this is hopefully you are becoming at least self-aware enough about some of the struggles you might have as a musician so you can end up cracking the code code so you can learn how to do improv. The next aspect, which is very important to when you want to play fast, is knowing when less is more. A lot of time, musicians will get focused on playing the fastest that they ever can. And while that is a very useful tool, playing like really fast, being able to go off and play some rhythmic values that are very, very difficult just for your average person to nail down, that is amazing, especially when you listen back to it. The ability for you to appreciate those moments comes at the simplicity, or at least somewhat of a simplicity within the song. The simplicity is kind of like this, it's a sliding scale. So it tends to be very, what's the word? I'm so bad. Sometimes I'm terrible with words. How do I fucking describe what it is when it's a spectrum. I'm like, what? I should know this. But yeah, it pretty much is a fucking spectrum about just how simple you make something. Even when less is more, it doesn't mean that you just have to totally abandon doing a lot in your music. And in fact, a lot of good improvisers spend a lot of time implementing simplicity with an asterisk, with a little star next to it. It's not really that simple, but they take things down a notch from where they could make things. Being able to know how to engage with that and being able to have a good relationship with that will make your really fast sections feel like they're actually fast. Because if you play fast a whole bunch, it destroys the purpose of playing fast. So the next one is involving setting up and breaking expectations. So many good improvisers do this. They will work on maybe establishing a few ideas and then depart from it. I think Corey Wong, he plays a lot of simple stuff, but he's able to break expectations. And even though it might be more simplistic ways in which he breaks expectations, that's why a lot of people love his playing style. When it comes to a lot of these musicians that end up enamoring people and being like, wow, these are geniuses, these are some of the most talented individuals, they set up and break expectations really, really quickly. So they're doing this as fast as possible. You're not able to really keep up in terms of what they're doing if you haven't studied it nearly as much. It's still even impressive when you've studied it all, because then you start understanding it and you get a really good appreciation for what they're doing to a whole other extent. But what they're doing to a lot of people who might not be nearly as versed in the language is that they set up and break expectations at such a speed sometimes that it's hard for you to kind of follow along. It's this language that they're pumping out at such a rate that being able to translate it is something that becomes more and more difficult. So whenever you listen to it and you hear a bunch of these amazing things happen, I mean, it still is fucking amazing. When you listen to all these amazing things happen and you're completely enamored, they're doing exactly the technique that makes improv really work as improv, and that is setting up and breaking audience expectations, because the audience has a relationship to music, and as the language has evolved, so has the improvisers. A lot of the amazing improvisers, they have taken a lot of the early language given, and they've given new ways that they can translate this language into new contexts. When you hear people who are amazing at doing improv, that is how they are able to do what they do. So I think I got into how like all these improv gods do work, but I'll kind of sum up a little bit how it works in case I did not talk about it enough, because I think it's important. And I think once you walk away from this video and you start practicing your improv skills, because that's the important thing, you need to find backing tracks. Go out, find backing tracks, and play to them. Being able to practice it and continuously work towards a goal might take a long time for you to actualize, but damn, it's totally worth spending the time if you can get the time. So practicing it, really important. Here's a couple of elements that I think all the improv gods really utilize. So I talked about them breaking expectations to such an extent, but improv gods, the people like Jacob Collier, Corey Henry, all the amazing improv gods that exist out there, they take all these elements that I've listed right here and they drive them to the extreme. They are playing on top of their own language that they've developed. So not only do they have the jazz language that they pulled from, but they have their own language that they continuously build upon. Not only are they using their own language as a way of shattering audience expectations, because you're not really there when they develop their own melodic voice, they also really much try and gauge how they play a little bit based off of how the audience interprets it. So the relationship that they have to music, they have a very good understanding of how the audience will interpret what they do. For example, Jacob Collier doing microtonal stuff. While microtonal stuff does exist in music, his ability to understand that it hardly exists within a Western context allows the microtonal stuff he does to register far more differently compared to if you were born in a different cultural context that's where microtones are very much more common. The musicians play with the audience's understanding of music as well. They as well internalize that, which makes them be able to do quite some amazing stuff in terms of improv based off of how the audience perceives harmony, how the audience perceives rhythm. So I've also mentioned that they're not only good at playing really slow stuff, that's the important stuff that they're able to showcase, and that's one of the ways in which they're able to solidify themselves is because they just have such a good understanding of how to play good slow musical material. Playing the really melodically important material. I'm not saying that playing fast melody isn't important, but melody is so much more at a forefront whenever you get to the slower stuff that you play. It very much has an impact, the notes that you play. They get really good at that, and that carries over to also how you play really fast material, because when you become really knowledgeable of how to play, like, I know there is a little bit of a meme how like, oh, like you play it slow, therefore you must be able to play fast. That's not necessarily true. When you have the ability to play slow stuff and you have such a good understanding of like how to play melody, and you're able to implement a wide variety of extensions into your melody playing, that really allows your music to kind of be its own music because you have such a good development of melody extensions. You can pretty much, when you have that understanding of how to do the slow stuff, it translates really well into the fast music. And like, it's not 100% a translation, but since you have such a good idea of how to play melody in that context, because you already know how to play fast stuff, then that also translates back into your fast stuff improving as well. So that's how also a lot of these improvisers end up getting really, really good on top of already the amazing music that they're able to pump out. So yeah, those are my tips when it comes to improv and understanding how a lot of these amazing musicians do the improv that a lot of people love them for. And now when it comes to extensions, I am talking about scale degrees. I just want to clarify this, a little bit of a wrap-up point before I'm done. Extensions can specify stuff like seconds. So for example, a C sus2 chord will be C, D, and G, which is a lot different from if you play just a standard C major chord. I mean, it's not that much different. It's still enough of a chordal quality difference. So you will have, in terms of scale degrees of what people play, they'll play like a second, but also a lot of notes that the odd extensions. So they have a relationship with a lot of like normal stuff, like, or not normal stuff, but stuff that people are less going to be like, that's not consonant. So a lot of people are going to call a lot of the stuff like C sus2, they're going to be like, oh, that's more consonant, compared to if someone plays something like a C sus flat 2, which is a way more spicier chord itself. Playing a second, a fourth, a sixth, that right there, that is the more consonant harmony. And then more odd stuff is like a flat 2, a sharp 4, a flat 6, a sharp 9, but that's like, or not sharp 9, a flat 9. A flat 9 is like the same thing as a sharp, or a flat 2. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to extensions, what you play, establishing stuff, a lot of the times it has to do with the types of extensions you establish as well. You know, if you're playing a, you know, a C sus4 chord and then you switch to being a C sus sharp 4 chord, then it's going to be interpreted differently, especially if you introduce that chord into a totally different section. That level of spice is going to be read differently, and it's going to have a much different impact on the music that you play. Chords are important to improv because they're also the foundation for melody. A lot of the time when we do play a lot of melody, there is some relationship to chords, not 100%, but if you count enough notes of said melody, it will form a chord of some type, whether that doesn't have a fifth or it's this off chord that has intervals that are very weirdly spaced. It's still a chord. Anyways, when it comes to people playing extensions as well, getting a good idea of extensions is extremely helpful. Well, also, I forgot one thing to mention as well. Rhythm vocabulary is also very important. A lot of these really good musicians will utilize time signatures, very odd time signatures. Jacob Collier is known for having songs that like go from being in like 4/4 to like 7 over like 16 or something like that, where he'll like modulate between different rhythmic ideas. You're only really able to do that when you start playing away from just conventional 4/4 timing, when you start playing a lot of just different odd time signatures, when you start getting into the really odd meters. Like, what is a 27 over 32? Well, you can practice that and you can implement those, and like also getting comfortable with fluctuating time signatures, how you can use fluctuating time signatures to create mood, and how that translates into the melodies that you use and it doesn't have to be perfectly 100% this 4/4 amalgamation that you're trying to shove something into. You know, you can play a little bit more with timing because you have a lot more experience playing the odd meters. So if you can work on as well, in addition to not only building up a good melody database, a melody bank, but building your own rhythmic bank, that will be very helpful, especially if you play a lot of really odd stuff. Math rock is phenomenal, not just in simply just having some odd meters that are more commonly used and stuck to. As well, you get into some more jazzier stuff, some more jazzier influence stuff, and you can go all the way out to avant-garde, and you can see some of the most out there rhythmic stuff. And while at the same time you might not utilize that stuff ever in your music, like avant-garde's very difficult to utilize in modern day music. You might not stick to that as being a viral song that blows you up on TikTok, but at the end of the day, you can implement a whole bunch of these rhythmic stuff that you learn playing in stuff that isn't 4/4, and that helps the rhythmic values of what you use in your music actually feel like it has a lot more weight, because you can pull from just so many more different ideas. You're not stuck in 4/4. You are kind of a little bit more free from 4/4, and so that allows you to also sound like a beast when it comes to improv, because you've played so many just odd out there rhythms that you're comfortable playing those in your improv. And so this right here is my best way of trying to explain improvisation to beginners and try and break it down in the most friendly way that I can think possible. I am not perfect, so you might need a little bit of music knowledge to get exactly what I'm talking about. I might make a separate topic about some scales. I don't know. This is how to do improv. I hope you enjoyed this way of me explaining how improv is done. I try to break things down to the best of my ability. I'm Ryan Wiseman. If you like this video, please press subscribe. I have a jazz improvisation record out that is non-commercial called New Jazz Cat on the Block, and it contains a lot of my jazz improvised stuff that I really, really, really love. I love how this record turned out. On top of that, I have a wide variety of also different music that almost has nothing to do with improvisation. I incorporate elements like that into my music all the time. It's not like the jazz record, which is heavily improvisation based. I mean, it's me literally playing melodica. Keep in mind, whenever you get comfortable, you can play kick-ass melodies like this. But as you can hear, I did a wide variety of different changes to that rhythm, or not rhythm, but to the melody and rhythm as well. And so that's also a melody that's in one of the songs, which I wish I repeated, but whatever. Can't change an improvised take after it's done. Being able to crank out melodies like that, finding really cool stuff like that, that took a long time. My ability to get there took many, many years of practicing. When it comes to playing stuff like this, I hope you do not get frustrated with yourself, because the journey to getting good at improv is a very frustrating one, and if you beat yourself up over trying to learn, do not fucking do it. First off, stop being mean to yourself, and you really need to appreciate your journey, because the thing about improv is it's hell to get really good at, because the language has been so fucking developed, and so I don't blame anyone for struggling. If this video is helpful, check out my records, check out my music. I will hopefully make some more music theory videos where I really get into trying to explain things. Give me a couple of ideas of videos to make in the comment section below, but I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself, don't be too harsh on yourself, and have fun playing jazz, improv, find those backing tracks. See ya!